Hello students, in this chapter we will be covering the reproductive system, which is the last chapter. So your final exam will consist of chapter 16 and chapter 15, which is the urinary system. So the reproductive system, when you think of the reproductive system, we often focus on the external genitalia, but really the main processes of the reproductive system goes on in the deeper structure. Now this is one structure without which we can live. So when you remove the reproductive system, we can survive a part of the reproductive system. And the reproductive system basically is normally for the future use. You don't really develop the reproductive system completely until after you hit puberty. So the reproductive system is the system which helps in sexual reproduction, and it helps in producing new individuals, right? And the gametes include sperm in males and eggs or ova in female, and the gonads are the primary sex organs. The gonads in males are called testes, and the gonads in female are called ovaries. The gonads are responsible for producing the gametes. So the gametes are basically sperm and egg that contain the chromosomes for transferring genes. And gonads are also responsible for secretion of sex hormones. So the reproductive system consists of gonads, several ducts and glands, and a lot of supporting structure. Gynecology is the field of study of female reproductive system. Urology is the field of study of male urinary and reproductive system. So the sperm production begins at puberty and continues through life, and millions of sperms are produced every day. So the male sperm is produced throughout a lifetime, but female, they only have so many eggs that are produced, and we utilize, or the eggs start degrading after a certain age. We'll talk a little more about that if time permits later. So the sperm is formed in something called as the seminiferous tubules of the testes. And spermatogonia, which are the stem cells that gives rise to the sperm, begin at puberty. And during puberty, there's something called as follicle stimulating hormone, which is secreted, and it targets specifically the testes that stimulate sperm production. So the hormones basically drive puberty, and when these hormones kick in, we start developing sperm, and the eggs start maturing in females, and it makes us sexually active and to be able to reproduce. So this portion of the male reproductive system is called the scrotum. The scrotum is the sac that holds the testes. And if you look at the inside of the testes, it contains something called as the seminiferous tubules. Now, seminiferous tubules is a highly coiled structure inside the testes where sperm is produced. And from the seminiferous tubules, the sperm is passed on to the rete testes. So this area is called the rete testes. And from the rete testes, the sperm travels to the epididymis. So the epididymis is the highly coiled tubule forming comma-shaped structure. So this is the epididymis. which lies posterior to the surface of the testes. So the main function of the epididymis is the storage and maturation of the sperm and to secrete nutritive substance for the sperm. So for 18 hours, the sperm needs to stay in the epididymis before it becomes mobile. So the epididymis is the first place the sperm travels after being produced, and it stays here for 18 hours. Now, which are the cells that produce sperm? So the cells that are specialized in producing sperm are present in the seminiferous tubules, and they are called Leydig cells or interstitial cells. Leydig cells or interstitial cells. So Leydig cells are the specialized cells in the seminiferous tubules where androgens like testosterone is produced. So keep this in mind, this might show up in the exam. Testosterone is produced by the Leydig cells outside the seminiferous tubules. The process of cell division by which sperm, the final gametes in the testes are formed, is called spermatogenesis, and the process is known as specifically meiosis. Meiosis is the type of cell division that only takes place in reproductive cells. Your cheek cells do not undergo meiosis, they undergo another process known as mitosis. So the meiosis is the process of cell division that helps in formation of gametes or sex cells. Now, this involves two successive divisions of the nucleus, namely meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, which results in formation of 4 daughter cells that we call gametes. Now, the process of gamete formation in the male it results in formation of 2 types of cells, and the type A daughter cell results in the formation of a stem cell that is capable of producing more gametes, and type B daughter cell that divides into 4 sperms. So one cell forms gamete, the other cell basically remain the stem cell to help continue the population of gametes. Now the gametes are spermatids with 23 chromosomes. So finally, the gametes that are formed are called spermatids, and they contain 23 chromosomes. Now keep in mind, human beings contain 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs. So one set of 23 chromosomes is obtained from the mother, the other set is obtained from the father. So we get 23 from the mom and 23 from the dad, and all together in every other cell of the body we find 46 chromosomes. But in a gamete you only find 23 chromosomes. So this is called the haploid number, which is half the number of genetic material in other cells of the body. Now, in every other cell of the body, you have 46 chromosomes. But in the sperm or the egg, we only have a haploid number, which is 23 chromosomes. So when the sperm and egg combine, it creates a zygote, which is the normal 46 chromosomes. So keep this in mind. The sperm and egg are haploid in nature, but when they combine, they create 46 chromosome zygote. So the process of formation of male gametes is known as spermatogenesis. Now, spermiogenesis is the process of formation of spermatids. So spermatids are non-motile and not as functional as a sperm. And the sperm has, well, the next stage is the sperm when it matures and ends up having 3 regions: the head, the midpiece, and the tail. Now the acrosome is the region that sits next to the sperm head, which contains a nucleus. The entire process of spermatogenesis, including spermiogenesis, takes place in about 64 to 72 days. So the difference in spermatogenesis and spermiogenesis is that spermiogenesis is the maturation of the spermiogenesis is the formation of spermatids in the lumen, and spermatogenesis itself is the whole process of formation of type A cells and type B cells. So this process shows the formation of sperm, and the sperm formation takes place in the seminiferous tubules of the testes, and the process begins by the stem cells that are known as spermatogonia. That's found in the periphery of each tubule. So the spermatogonia are found right along the periphery of the seminiferous tubule. And the spermatogonia itself goes through rapid mitotic division, not meiotic. Now, mitotic division results in the formation of the exact same copy of the cell. So if a cell has 46 chromosomes, the end product of mitosis will also result in 46 chromosomes. Okay, so the spermatogonium forms type A and type B cells. The type A daughter cell remains at the basement membrane right over here, and it will act as a stem cell to continue the production of the sperm. And during puberty, follicle-stimulating hormone is secreted in large amounts that triggers the formation of sperm. From birth until puberty, nothing much happens, but once follicle-stimulating hormone is secreted, sperm production is stimulated. Now, the other cell is the type B cell. Now, type B cell is the type of daughter cell that ends up forming the sperm itself. Now, this process is called mitosis. Everything beyond this will be called meiotic division. Now, meiosis is a special type of nuclear division that only occurs in the testes and ovary. The difference between mitosis and meiosis is that meiosis consists of two successive divisions, and in the end, meiosis will give rise to haploid cells. On the other hand, mitosis gives rise to the exact same type of daughter cell, which will have the same number of chromosomes as the parent cell. All right, so back to the type B cell. Now, the type B cell gets pushed through towards the tubule lumen, where it becomes a primary spermatocyte. And this is just trying to undergo meiosis to form 4 sperm cells. Now, in spermatogenesis, the gametes are called spermatids. And the spermatids only have half the number of chromosomes as the parents, and it's called reduction division because the number of chromosomes gets divided into half the number. Now, as meiosis occurs, the dividing cells, this is the primary and secondary spermatocytes, are pushed through the lumen of the tubule and follow the process of meiosis. And in the end of the meiotic division, the cells get divided into the haploid number of cells. So the process of maturation of these haploid cells into actual sperm is called spermiogenesis. So during the process of spermiogenesis, which is the last stage, these cells develop a head, a midpiece, and a tail. So this process of maturation of the haploid cells into actual sperm-like structures is called spermiogenesis. Now, well, a mature sperm consists of a very streamlined body and it has a very high rate of metabolism. So the mature sperm actually has really high number of mitochondria because it needs a lot of energy to swim to get to the egg. So if you look at the structure of the sperm consists of a head which contains the nucleus. This contains the genetic instructions, which is the genetic material, and helps in penetrating through the egg. And this region is called the midpiece, and the midpiece is rich in mitochondria. Now, during the process of fertilization, so much energy is consumed that all the ATP in the mitochondria is consumed. So every person on Earth basically only contain mitochondrial DNA from the mother and not from the father, because all the mitochondria during the process of fertilization is exhausted. So mitochondrial DNA is actually used in processes like, ancestry, for identifying the ancestry of people. And the last piece is called the tail. The tail basically contains flagella, and this is the only cell in the human body that contains flagella. And the flagella is a structure that helps in providing mobility for the sperm. Okay. So the head contains the nucleus, which contains the genetic material, and the nucleus itself is covered by a structure known as acrosome. The acrosome contains enzymes which are very similar to the lysosome. So they are basically digestive enzymes. So when it comes in contact with an egg, it releases the enzyme to be able to allow the DNA to penetrate through the egg to allow the process of fertilization. So the entire process of the formation of primary spermatocyte to release immature sperm takes about 72 days, 64 to 72 days. But the sperm and the lumen are still unable to swim and are incapable of fertilizing the egg. So they are moved by the process of peristalsis. So the smooth muscles in the tubule basically push these immature sperm, and they are moved into the epididymis. So in the epididymis, they stay for 18 hours where they mature into motile sperm. Now, there are several environmental factors that can alter the normal process of sperm formation. For example, antibiotics can slow down the process of sperm formation, radiation, pesticides, marijuana, tobacco, all of these can lead to the formation of abnormal sperm production, and they can lead to infertility. So the main hormone that leads to the production of sperm is called testosterone. Okay. So the other parts of, so we looked at the testes, and the other parts of the male and reproductive system include the duct system, which include the epididymis. This is where the sperm matures into mobile sperm, and the ductus deferens, urethra, this is the opening through which the urine is let out. We'll talk about it in just a second. And the other accessory organs include the seminal gland or the vesicle, the prostrate gland, the bulbourethral gland, and the external genitalia, which includes the penis and the scrotum. Okay. So the duct system include the accessory organs that form the male reproductive system. The main function of the duct system is to transport sperm from the body. The first part of the duct system is the epididymis that we looked at. So right over here, this is the epididymis. The epididymis is a cup-shaped, highly coiled tube. It's about 20 feet long that hugs the posterior side of the testes. Now, this is the first part of the reproductive system through which the sperm travels. And when a man is sexually stimulated and ejaculates, the walls of the epididymis contract to expel the sperm into the next part of the duct system, which is called the vas deferens or the ductus deferens. Now, the ductus deferens runs upward into the pelvic cavity, and it arches over this area right over here. And it arches over the urinary bladder, and the tube is enclosed with the blood vessels and nerves, and it's connected by a sheath known as the spermatid cord. So the ductus deferens loops medially over the ureter to descend along the posterior bladder wall. So the end of the ductus deferens expands, and it's known as the ampulla. For your purposes, you don't have to know all that, but just know that this is the ductus deferens. So the main function of the ductus deferens is to transfer the live sperm from the storage site, which is the epididymis, into the urethra. So the opening for urine and ejaculation of the sperm is the same in the males. So a male cannot ejaculate and pee at the same time because it only has one opening. So the sperm goes up the ductus deferens and comes down the ampulla, and then it goes down into the ejaculatory duct and is ejaculated right out of the urethral orifice. So when males undergo vasectomy, basically what happens is that they cut through the scrotum and they litigate or tie off the ductus deferens. And after this process, the sperm is still produced, but they are unable to be transported to the urethral orifice, and they cannot, they're non-sterile after this process. They're sterile after this process, but the hormones are still produced. So the males are sexually active, they retain the sex drive, but they can no longer have kids. So once the ductus deferens is tied off, basically the sperm can no longer reach the exterior of the body. So the sperm remains in this area and they deteriorate, or they get degraded after a while because they can no longer be transported out of the body. So the urethra is the next portion that is basically eventually connected to the reproductive system. Let's see. Okay. So the urethra can be divided into three regions. The first one is the prostatic urethra. The prostatic urethra is surrounded by the prostrate gland, and then you have the membranous urethra, or the intermediate urethra, which spans the distance from the prostrate urethra all the way to the spongy urethra. The spongy urethra runs the length of the penis, opening into the exterior of the body via the external urethral orifice. So the male urethra basically carries urine and sperm to the exterior of the body. So it performs two processes. It is also a part of the urinal and the reproductive system. However, the urine and sperm can never pass through the same time. So when ejaculation occurs, the sperm, when ejaculation occurs, basically a sphincter muscle which is present right about, we'll look at another picture which will give you a better perspective. There's a muscle called as the internal urethral sphincter, which is a bladder sphincter. That muscle constricts and it prevents urine from passing into the urethra during ejaculation. Okay, so if you look at this picture over here, the internal urethral sphincter is present right about here, and it constricts during the process of ejaculation. So the other accessory organs include the seminal vesicle, which is right over here in this picture. And if you look at the seminal vesicle over here, it's present posterior to the urinary bladder. The seminal vesicle is also known as the seminal gland. It is present at the base of the bladder, and they produce something called as the seminal fluid. It's the thick yellowish secretion which is rich in vitamin C, prostaglandins, and other substances which nourish and activate the sperm. So basically the semen is rich in nutritious fluids that protect the sperm and keep them active. So during ejaculation, the sperm and seminal fluid are produced together, and they are exited to the exterior of the body together during ejaculation. So the next part of the reproductive system, which is an accessory gland, is the prostate. Now the prostate is present right over here. It is a donut-shaped gland which contains a pit. And the prostate gland secretion is a milky fluid that plays in activating the sperm. During ejaculation, the fluid enters the urethra through several small ducts, and because the prostate is located anterior to the rectum, it can be felt by finger examination into the anterior rectal wall, so which you're probably aware of. So you look at the other angle, the prostate is right over here. So prostate is one organ that is affected in nearly every older man, and it strangles the urethra. So when the prostate is affected, it makes it difficult to urinate, and it enhances the risk of bladder infection, which is known as cystitis, and it causes kidney damage. So traditionally surgery had been used, but nowadays there are drugs and microwaves that can be used to shrink the prostate gland, or they can insert a balloon to compress the prostate tissue. And prostatitis is another condition which causes the inflammation. Itis means inflammation, and it is the single most common reason for a man to consult the urologist. And then there's prostate cancer. And all of these conditions can be preliminarily be diagnosed by the finger examination because it is easily accessible through the rectum. Now, the other accessory glands include the bulbourinary gland. It is a pea-sized gland behind the prostate gland, and they produce a thick, clear mucus that drains into the penile urethra. So this is a secretion that is first passed down to the urethra when a man becomes sexually excited. It cleanses the urethra of traces of acidic urine before ejaculation. So it basically serves as a lubricant during sexual intercourse. Now, now the semen itself is a milky white mixture that is produced along with the secretions. And mature sperm cells contain all of these liquids mixed together. The fructose in seminal vesicle basically gets secreted, and it's really very sluggish. So the sperm is under acidic conditions below pH 6, and the relative alkalinity of the semen, which is 7.2 to 7.6, helps in neutralizing the acidic environment of the sperm. And the female vagina is really under acidic conditions, which is about 3.5 to 4. So semen basically is the milky white substance that is produced by seminal vesicles and helps in neutralizing the environment. So the semen also dilutes the sperm, and without dilution, the sperm motility is impaired, and it will make a person infertile. So the main role of the bulbourethral gland and the seminal vesicle is to produce fluids to maintain the pH of the sperm, and also maintain the pH during fertilization. So main infertility can be caused due to several reasons. One of the reasons is like the obstruction of the ductus deferens, which is nothing but vasectomy that is performed, or it can be caused due to obstruction due to natural reasons like hormonal imbalances or environmental estrogens, pesticides, overuse of alcohol, etc. So the first thing they do to analyze the infertility is to do a semen analysis to check the sperm count and to check the pH and the fructose content. So the semen itself is a mixture that contains sperm. It's highly slippery and mucousy, and it contains a lot of sugar, specifically fructose. Now the fructose basically provides nutrition to the sperm. So by analyzing all these aspects, they can count the number of sperm, and a sperm count below 20 million per millimeter makes impregnation impossible. Now the external genitalia basically consists of the scrotum that we looked at. The scrotum consists of the testes, and the penis is a part of the external genitalia, and the skin covered penis consists of the shaft. So this is called the shaft or the body of the penis, and it ends in the large tip, which is known as the glans penis. The skin covering the penis is loose and it folds downwards. It's called the prepuce or the foreskin, and frequently the foreskin is surgically removed after birth by a process called circumcision. Internally, it contains the spongy urethra, and it is surrounded by the erectile tissue that helps in erection. Now, during the process of erection, the spongy tissue is engorged with blood, and this causes the penis to enlarge and become rigid. So this event is called erection, and this region is rich in blood vessels. So during the process of erection, this process gets engorged with blood. All right.